Hi, my name is Jamie Noguchi, and welcome to Draw Jam. Today is part 2 of our digital workflow series where I'm going to go through some inking techniques in Photoshop. So, let's just get to it. It's inking time! So, this is the sketch that we did last time with our digital sketching in Photoshop. And now we are going to do some inking over this. Before we get started, I noticed that her hand is somewhat gigantic, which is something that happens sometimes when I draw. I guess I could say it's a style thing, but I'd be lying. So I'm gonna lasso the hand and shrink that a little bit so it's not so friggin' massive. And that seems like a more appropriate size. Okay. So again, we're in Photoshop CS5. I do have a set of inking brushes that I like to use, but I'm just going to use the default stuff because I don't want you to have to go out and buy things in order to follow along with this tutorial. But there are Photoshop's basic tools are okay, but there are people out there who have done some tweaking and figured out better settings for things like inking or sketching or painting or things like that. So when you get to a point and you're tired of using Photoshop's default stuff, I would highly recommend going out and finding a brush set that works for you. I use Frenden's brushes, and I'll link those in the show notes. Other people use other stuff, so it's really a matter of personal taste. But just so you know, Photoshop's default stuff is somewhat garbage. They might have fixed that in a more current version. I'm working with CS5. Like Creative Cloud might have an amazing, magnificent brush set that I don't know about, but these are kind of terrible. So we're gonna see how far we can get with some terrible brushes. All right, before I get started, I am going to create a new group and call this the inking group. Inks, which is really funny because this group I'm gonna also do the colors in it, but oh, whatever, we'll get to that next. And then we'll do one layer for the, well, we'll just start with one layer first off. Other things I like to do, so I have all the sketching, all my sketches in a group here that I can turn on and off, or I can lower the opacity, which is what I usually like to do. Now, if your pencils are better than what I have here, if your pencils are very specific and tight and really nice and clean, you can just use those as your inks when it comes time to color. If they're drawn on paper or if they're drawn digitally, if your penciling stage is the last stage, then all you need to do is some cleanup with some levels and things like that. We're not going to go through that process. We might do that at some other point, but my pencils tend to be very sketchy and messy because I enjoy the inking process so much. I want to kind of let the happy accidents happen. So so this is all personal preference from this point on, and I'm just going to hide that bottom layer, but to give you some insight on the way I like to ink. So let's start off by grabbing our hard round basic brush. So in terms of line thickness, the way I like to give my lines a little bit of a personality. So when I ink, I usually start off thin, a little bit of pressure, go to thick, and then thin again. As opposed to drawing a line that's the same width all the way across. So this line on the left, to me, has a little bit more personality. Towards the middle here, it seems to have a little bit more weight, and towards the edges, it gets a little bit more thinner. It gets more thin, which also indicates like a lighter feel to it. Whereas this line isn't very interesting in and of itself. What it defines might be really cool. Like this could be the edge of like a mech or something like that. But by itself, this line, this straight line, isn't very interesting. Now, when it comes to a more animated, cartoony style, you'll see thin lines like this all over the place because the line itself doesn't matter. What it's defining matters. But for me, I want my lines to sort of, I don't know, it's hard to describe, but kind of speak for themselves or enhance what's going on. So with these thick lines, thin lines, I can define things like weight or shadow, corners and scratches and folds and things like that. So that's a personal taste, and that's the way I approach inking. When I ink on actual paper, I prefer using brushes rather than pens because brushes allow me to get the sweeping motions here and like the little hatch marks, so I can get really big lines and really thin lines. Oh, the other thing you can do in digital inking that you can't do with traditional inking is you can increase the brush size and go ham. Now you notice this round bumpy stuff that makes this line look like a caterpillar, and that's something in the Photoshop engine that kind of screws up. This is why I usually don't like the default presets. We can kind of get rid of that with, let's see, where is my brush preset palette? Oh, I never use it. Okay, here we go. Brush presets. So you can kind of get rid of that with some, I don't remember how to do that. Is it scattering? Nope, it's definitely not scattering. Let's see, roundness, jitter. Okay, that's not exactly what I want. Nope, not at all. Anyway, there's a way to make it so that it doesn't look like a bunch of dots going across the line. But clearly I haven't played with these settings enough. Usually I just get someone else's brush set because that's what I do. Oh, come back layers. Okay, so what is going on here? Alright, anyway, so let's get back to our layer palette. Because, oh, I see what happened. I'm gonna bring this all the way back here. Turn off the, hey, come back. Okay, so let's get rid of this, undock this, get rid of that. Professional demo, folks. Alright, back to our layer. Let's get rid of these demo slashes and let's start with the actual inking. Alright, so I like to, if I'm inking a face, I like to start with the nose. I have no reason for that other than that's where I like to start. So essentially, yes, I am tracing, but I'm adding depth and weight to what I'm inking. Another tip that's great, that's very helpful for inking, is to always turn your page. So even if you're inking on paper, it's best to turn your paper around. It helps, like pulling a line towards you, it helps keep your hand steady, so you can pull a straighter line like that, rather than pushing a line away from you. It's a little bit more janky, unless you're going with a fast motion. So pulling lines towards you gives you a lot more control, which is why it's a great idea to turn the page to get certain angles. So, all right, enough talking. I'm just gonna start inking. I kind of go a little bit heavier on the outside of the eyes. Oh, another thing I like to do when I'm inking is use thicker lines to define the outlines of a shape, and then I'll go back in with a thinner line and bring out some of the details and fiddly bits. And that's not so much of a thing when I'm drawing a face, but you'll see when I work on the monster part that I'll use these thicker lines to define an area and then go back in and really noodle around with creases and folds and other weird crap that I like to put into those things. Let's see. Okay, and then bring this down. Oops. Depending on my mood, I'll either go back in and render the pupils or stuff like that, or I'll just leave it for the coloring. Haven't decided yet, so leave it there. Definitely the chin, the outside of the chin and the cheek. I usually have a pretty thick outline there. Don't forget to drink water, folks. Oh, so this dot here, so I'm working on a Cintiq Companion 2, which is great in general, but sometimes the palm detection isn't so great. So the palm detection meaning whenever you draw with the stylus, it won't detect your hand on the surface. This dot over here, every once in a while, this happens a lot in Photoshop. It doesn't happen so much on Manga Studio, but for some reason the palm detection is kind of janky, so sometimes things like that'll happen. So we'll just erase that. But keep that in mind. Keep in mind that sometimes your tools will be working against you, even if you're working digitally, which is kind of a shame because that's why you work digitally, so you can have all this customization on your tools. Alright, so let's jump into the eyebrows. Okay, now always remember to zoom out in your work just to see how it's going. It can get really easy to just kind of zoom in all the way and get lost in the details, but you want to kind of zoom out and see if you like where things are headed, just to keep an overall idea. Another thing you can do, so let's get out of full screen mode, and let's turn on the navigator. So the navigator gives you a small window anyway, if you don't have a dual screen setup. So you can set this and just kind of put it to the side, and then, you know, work as close as you want. And instead of zooming out, you can just take a look to your left and check out the navigator and see if it's looking the way you want it to look. Only problem is that it takes up more screen real estate than you necessarily want, so I just kind of, you know, it doesn't take a whole lot of time to just zoom out and zoom back in. So, but that's another thing you can do. Alright, there's a lot of fiddly stuff going in here in the collar, so I'm going to leave that alone for now and just attack the hand. I always have problems with nails. I don't know. I just have difficulty drawing nails. I'm also really bad at trees and cars, so I'll probably end up doing a tutorial on drawing trees and cars, because you only get better by drawing stuff you hate or stuff you suck at drawing. So look forward to Tree Week. Or don't. Maybe you hate trees too. Oh, another advantage to inking digitally is you don't have to worry about smudging something. So you can't tell now because I'm just recording off of the screen, but my hand is all up in this area and there's no smudging because I don't have to worry about drying time or anything like that. So that's not to say that digital inking is superior to regular inking. I actually prefer working in regular ink, but working digitally just makes it easier for me to fix things if I'm working with a client, and it certainly makes it easier for me to demonstrate because I don't have to set up an external camera and worry about lighting and all that kind of stuff. I can just set it up and go. So most of the techniques that I use digitally are the same. They're based on the same principles that I use when I'm drawing traditionally or working in the really real world. They're just adapted to a different medium or different drawing environment. Alright, there's a lot of fiddly bits in here that's gonna happen when I get to the creature part of this, but so far so good. I'll just kind of Nah, I'll just leave that. Turn off there. That's what a hand's supposed to look like. Okay, so I'm going to jump into the creature part, which takes up a lot of this stuff here and a lot of stuff down there. Now you notice everything is very loosely defined, and that's a personal preference. Sometimes you might want to get it a little bit more specific with your shapes and things like that. And actually, I think I'm going to add some more details to things just to map out the general silhouette a little bit better. So I'm going to go back into my sketch folder. I'm going to turn up the opacity a little bit. And the stuff I'm going to add, I'm going to draw in with red. So I'm going to go back over. If you want to maintain your primary color, in this case it's black, you just hit the X button and you switch the swatch for the one that you're working on. So I wanted the red one, and now I'm black, back to red. Okay, so I'm going to use this red color to sort of better define the silhouette here, to kind of map out where I'm going. Especially need it down here. Yup. This is what it takes, folks. Lots of scraggly drawings. Alright, and I'm turn that down a little bit just to kind of blend that in, and then turn all of that crap down. Alright, so because things might get a little bit crazy, I'm going to start a new layer, get back to black, and like I start with the person, I'm going to start with the beak, or the nose, of the owl-like monster creature. This is where a lot of fun stuff happens, because the way I typically develop these monsters is I start with the basic forms, the outlines of the thing, and then kind of cut in with different venting and wrinkles, and I add extra eyes where there shouldn't be. And even though most of this stuff is made up, I do want to maintain some sense of underlying form and anatomy. So I use these thicker lines to define major areas like holes or creases or edges of shapes. And then these little fiddly lines to kind of bring in some texture. general rule of thumb is I don't know, just put in some creepy stuff. And this is where the digital jitter kind of helps. Like, Photoshop is kind of unforgiving when it comes to drawing. If your hand shakes at all, it's going to show up on the screen. It doesn't have brush smoothing like something like Manga Studio does. At least CS5 doesn't. I don't know if CS Creative Suite or Creative Cloud, I don't know, Creative whatever. I don't know if the current stuff has the ability to smooth out the brushes. But at least in CS5, they didn't care. They were like, you're using Photoshop for drawing? That's not what we intended it for. Gotta give it up to Malibu Comics in the 90s for coming up with a lot of the digital techniques that we still use today to color comics. They kind of pioneered all of this crazy stuff. I'm sure the people at Adobe were like, they're using what for what? And now it's industry standard. You can't get away from using Photoshop if you're interested in doing comics, at least in color. Unless you're super amazing and paint all your pages, but then, you know, you never get a book out because that takes a long time. Okay, the nice thing about monsters is they don't require symmetry. In fact, they look better when they're asymmetrical and there's details on one side that aren't on the other side. Also, that's just an excuse for me because I'm terrible at drawing things symmetrical. So, play to your strengths, people. Play to your strengths. Know what you is good at, and what you am not. It's vaguely symmetrical, but only vaguely. Alright, so I'm using these thicker lines around the eye area to kind of denote that this is a hard edge and that these eyes are sunken in. So that's why I like using these thick to thin lines. If this was a more cartoony style and I was working with lines that were the same weight, there'd probably be less fiddly stuff in here, fewer wrinkles. Just because too many lines will muddle up your silhouette or your shape if you're working in a cartoony style. But I don't have to worry about that because these thick lines do the defining of the shape for me. One way to kind of define areas in a cartoony style is to use color and shading, which we will discuss the next time. Don't worry about tangents. Tangents. All right, I should do a quick explanation of what a tangent is. So let's see, let's create a new layer. Mathematically speaking, if you have like a curve and a line, this area here is a tangent. When we're drawing, when we're inking, when we're doing anything with lines, let's say I have a box here. Here's a box. And then I draw another box that starts here. This area becomes problematic because this line doesn't break. So this line defines one edge of this box and another edge of this box. And that's confusing for the eye. We can get rid of this with coloring and shading and stuff like that, but the strongest illustrations look really good just with plain line art, and color and shading only enhance it. So if you got janky stuff in your inking or your line art, it's gonna make the colorist's job a little bit more tricky. So to get rid of a tangent like this, what we should do is either, let's see, what we should do is either separate the boxes so that visually you can see that, hey, they're two different things. They don't run into each other. Or you could be very tricksy and false and kind of nudge one of them. So like here. So you can tell that this one is in front of this one. And it's, when you zoom out, it's still kind of problematic, but it's less of a tangent. So there are a couple of different ways to get rid of tangents. The other thing you could do is like, if we go back to our terrible example, bam, you could thicken the outlines of the one that you want to be in front, and so it's a little bit more apparent, but you still have this point, and it still looks like these two objects could be smushed together. So really you want to make sure that you break all these tangent lines, that you don't have lines that continue from one shape to another shape. So that's what tangents are. So when you're inking things, even if it's a creepy creature like this, you want to be aware of tangent areas and kind of avoid them, unless they're intentional. And sometimes they might be intentional. But in general, you don't want that stuff to creep into your work. Makes it difficult for the colorist to see what you're trying to define in terms of which shape goes in front of which another shape, or where a new object begins and where it ends. So if you are the colorist, then you might not notice the tangent because you know exactly what you want to put in front of what. And then sometimes the coloring can fool the eye and make the eye not notice that there's a tangent. But anal retentive artists like myself will notice, like, there's a bad tangent there. I can't believe they let this in the book. And you'll know who will notice? No one. No one will notice. The readers won't friggin' care. But for better peace of mind and for stronger illustration and for cleaner line art, stay away from tangents. They are evil. They make your composition bleed into itself. Ouroboros. Alright, I think I'm taking too long here, so I'm just gonna speed up the process by drawing faster, which is something I tell everybody that I'm terrible at. I cannot draw fast. I am very slow. So if you've stuck with this demo for this long, I applaud you. You are a scholar and a saint. Alright, I'm going to continue on. Sometimes in corners I like to use the ink, the lines, to define somewhat of a shadow, like in this corner here and in this corner here. I'm not going on full spot blacks where I'm using blacks to define huge areas of shadow. Sometimes I like to do that, but for a piece like this where I'm going to also be demonstrating coloring techniques, I kind of want to keep some areas open and let the coloring and the shading do some of the talking. But if you really want to create a moody piece, a moody atmosphere, giant areas of black is going to be a great way to kind of emotionally manipulate your viewers. Okay, let's go back and erase this brow line here. Narrowly avoided a tangent. Narrowly. It was tricky. Okay, let's see. Well, let's zoom out. So far we got a brain-eating monster. Rah. Okay, with these creatures I tend to get lost in the woods. So I'm trying to keep to what I say about going around the composition so you don't just get focused in on one area. Keep in mind the entirety of your piece. Okay, let's see. Let's zoom out a little bit. See this edge here. What was that? That was ugly. Sometimes you make an ugly line. What's great about digital ugliness is you can erase it. Okay. Looks like a wrinkled old. It kind of looks like an owl. There we go. A vaguely owl-looking monster thing. Remember, more water, especially if you're talking while inking. Remember, always water. Always water. In general, you should try to be healthy. Okay, let's see. I'm going to start on the arm section here, on this weird gauntlet type thing. And here I want to kind of use the ink line to denote a little bit of separation between the arm and the gauntlet. Decisions, decisions, decisions. It's almost like you should plan these things out before you start them. Especially if you're doing a demonstration for people. It's like a cooking show. You should have like a before and after. But I don't know, man. I don't want to cheat it. So you're getting the whole unfiltered brain process, step by step, not skipping anything, so you can see everything I mess up and redraw and undo and redo and all that kind of stuff. There's no edited for time here, folks. Here's another situation where I'm going to use black to define a shadow area. I don't really care about the tangents in this area, just because the idea is that these veiny, muscly wrinkle things are kind of bleeding into each other anyway. So if a tangent shows up, I don't really care. And also, you're not going to notice that. You're going to notice the stupid owl thing on her head. Although you guys might notice, because I just said something about it. But oh, don't forget to save often. Saving should just become second nature. It's really bad sometimes when I'm drawing on paper. My left hand will do the motion for saving, and nothing will happen, and I'll be like, "What? Oh." wonder how long it would take to get into an outfit like this. It'd just be crazy. Your goal. Draw something that is uncosplayable. I kind of want to define these a little bit better. What's going on? What's going on? Weird fan blades, yay. All right, let's see what's going on here. Nope, bad tangent. Less of a tangent. Just adding some texture in here just to kind of break up these forms a little bit. They're just really big. Okay, so we got that going on. Let's get these vaguely chicken wing things getting in here. Sneaky tangent, sneaky tangent. Nope. Nope. Not gonna fall into your tangent trap. No. Okay, so let's turn off the sketches see what we got here in general. Could use some more of these fiddly bits. Silhouette is pretty good, surprisingly. This can be brought out a little bit more. Yeah, I think that's good. I think that's good for now. I might add some other stuff off camera or not. But the next time we meet, the next tutorial is going to be coloring, and I'm going to start with a basic anime style shading style, and then we'll see how many different versions of coloring I can do with this one subject. So there might be many coloring tutorials, or there might just be one coloring tutorial. It depends on how long it takes. All right, so yeah, that does it for this part. Thanks for tuning in. If you have any questions about anything you saw in the video, please hit me up wherever you see this in the comment section. And if any of this was helpful to you, give you some ideas for your workflow, or helped you out with some inking stuff, please hit the subscribe button. All right, next time we're going to go into some coloring techniques. Not sure how many I'm going to be able to cover in one video. It depends on how long it takes. So it might be one video, might be multiple videos. We'll see. All right, but I'll catch you next time. Bye.